spent so long in London, learning how to belong somewhere else, my dear British friends giving me the emotional equivalent of a cattle prod every time I acted like an American, that I wasn't sure what would happen when I came back. I wondered if the landscape would recognize me. I wondered if I would recognize myself in it. Because home has a strange way of keeping your shape even after you've changed, and I was afraid I'd changed too much. That I would come back to the shoreline, the familiar names, the old light falling across the water, and discover that I no longer fit inside any of it. That I had become a visitor in the place where I had once been known. But I came back with a splash, carrying all those years with me, not quietly, not carefully, but as usual, I had never learned how to return without making a scene. And then somehow, there were little moments, ordinary ones, almost too small to notice, that began to shift something in me. I didn't know it then, but something had already begun to change the shape of my life, quietly, almost imperceptibly, before I had any idea what or who was behind it. I didn't yet understand that some part of me had always been there, waiting to be seen more deeply, and that something was about to reach it so quietly, so completely. Not by making me someone else, but by showing me how much more beautiful life could become. People think life changes when the sky splits open, when the moment announces itself as important, when trumpets arrive on schedule, or for any British people here, schedule. As loud and brash as I can be, there has always been a quieter part of me that prefers the things that change me without announcing themselves. It has always favored the quiet rearrangements, the unnoticed migration of gravity, the way an ordinary afternoon tilts one imperceptible degree until every compass you have ever carried is pointing toward a person without your cognizance. I think that's how we discover where we belong, not through the neat progression from one expected milestone to the next, boring, or witness declarations, but through interruptions, through the tiny edits made to an otherwise ordinary day. A name that begins appearing in places it never used to, a story that becomes incomplete unless you tell it to someone, the kind of compassion that doesn't arrive with expectation, a ceremony around it, but quietly changes the shape of the life you were already living. You collect observations and save them. A ridiculous cloud, a dog that looks philosophical, a sentence from a book, a terrible pun. Your life quietly develops a second audience. No ceremony marks that crossing, just 1,000 invisible stitches, pulling two ordinary days a little closer together. Love isn't a single lit doorway, but a hallway you've been walking down, before realizing that the light had been there all along, slipping through the smallest cracks, leaving little glimpses of warmth on the walls around you, until you finally understand where the light was coming from. For me, it arrived disguised as the smallest question, a name, she said, Laura. A name that belonged to another chapter of my life, one that had once held a good portion of me. And before I had time to become the version of myself that knows patience, or conversational restraint, or dignity, I heard myself ask her, who's Laura? Such a tiny sentence, almost embarrassing in its innocence. But there it was, the quiet confession I hadn't yet translated. Because in that impossible ordinary instant, I understood that I had begun dividing my attention between the whole wide world and one person. And somewhere along the way, my life had acquired a much more beautiful layer. The first layer was my world as everyone saw it. The second was the overly energetic world I tried, usually unsuccessfully, to myself. But then there was this, the deepest layer, soul deep, the third layer, where the smallest, happiest moments began to matter in ways I didn't know how to explain. I hadn't known this layer, the third layer, was missing such beauty, missing such laughter, missing such warmth, missing such wonder. And once it was there, I couldn't imagine my life without her. And that's it.